tonight.
Shots fired! Get inside! Go, go, go!
A systematic failure by law enforcement. A look at the new report shedding light on the deadly elementary school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Plus,
we were preparing, but we couldn't have imagined the response.
The backlash facing crisis pregnancy centers in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. And we'll take you to one of the hardest hit cities in the Russian invasion of Ukraine to show how God is still moving amidst the devastation. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A damning new report highlights the breakdown of law enforcement during the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Tara Mergener. An hour and 15-minute attack that left 19 kids and 2 teachers dead. And a new report shines a light on the failures of multiple agencies that day. 376 officers responded to the shooting back in May, the majority from federal and state agencies. But according to the report from the Texas House, no one established a command post, leading to confusion, miscommunication, and delay.
If there's only one thing that I can tell you is there were multiple systemic failures. If you know there's active shooting, active killing going on, or somebody is dying, the standard is you have to continue to do something to stop that killing or stop that dying.
The report blaming egregiously poor decision-making for police inaction and noted that those officers who wanted to enter the building were denied access. The report also found that Robb Elementary was not adequately prepared for an armed intruder. For more now, we turn to Dr. Donnell Harvin. He is the former chief of Homeland Security and Intelligence for the District of Columbia and a senior researcher with the RAND Corporation. Donnell, did these law enforcement officers in Uvalde fail these children? And if so, what should be the consequences?
I don't want to paint the entire law enforcement response. There were hundreds of officers from multiple jurisdictions with that broad brush. However, the assessment that the leadership of the law enforcement that day failed is highly accurate. And I've been saying this since day number one. You don't have to be a trained first responder to look at the video and see the lack of coordination, the mass confusion, and even in his own words, the police chief came out and said that he wasn't in charge. If you're a police chief and you have 4 stars on your shoulders and you're saying you're not in charge, then I don't know who is. And that's the broader picture in this particular case.
You know, Donnell, we know police go through all sorts of training to prepare them for a situation like this. Can something more be done to prevent this kind of an action and confusion in the face of an active shooter situation?
I think the training is solid. And I've said this before, Texas is the leader in this active shooter training. A lot of the manuals, a lot of the tactics and techniques that law enforcement agencies across the country derive their training from were born out of Texas. We've learned a lot since Columbine. We've learned a lot since Parkland. Law enforcement officers are not supposed to stand by while there's an active threat. I train in the same tactics in DC. So I think the tactics and the training is good. I think the leadership is where we failed here. There were officers that clearly had instinct to allow their training to kick in, and they were held back. And so from a tactics standpoint, it's a complete debacle. From a leadership standpoint, it's a travesty.
There's been talk for years that teachers could actually help protect their students in these situations, school shootings. Do you agree?
Well, I'm a part-time college professor. I have a school teacher in my family. And I would say that teachers are paid to teach. They're not prepared or paid to fight off armed assailants with rifles, high-capacity magazines, and body armor. And so, you know, we've always heard all you need is more good guys with guns. There was a ton of good guys with a ton of guns. There were big guns there on that day. And I think law enforcement needs to step up and do their job. But it's not just law enforcement. It's also the school. The report also covered the fact that the school wasn't properly secured. It also covered the fact that there were red flags in this individual that the family acknowledged, and that those had gone unheeded and unreported. And so Uvalde really pulls out in one particular case, one very tragic case, all of the issues we've seen with mass shootings over the last 2 decades, all in one tragic case.
All right, Donnell, always appreciate your wonderful insight. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, the political battles over abortion have turned to crisis pregnancy centers. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren calling them deceptive and urging federal and state governments to take action against them. And a group of Democratic senators are pushing Google to censor pro-life clinics from search results, ads, and maps. On the Republican side, Senator Josh Hawley is unveiling a bill to protect pro-life clinics and houses of worship from violence. Fox reports Hawley took that action after attacks by left-wing protesters. As Charlene Aaron tells us, crisis pregnancy centers have been doing what they can to protect themselves.
Pregnancy centers nationwide remain on high alert due to attacks and threats following the court's decision on Roe. Many are improving and upgrading security and hardening their facilities, ensuring that staff and clients remain safe as they continue the fight for life. That's because since the fallout of the Roe abortion decision, dozens of incidents of violence, vandalism, and intimidation have been reported against pro-life pregnancy centers.
We were preparing, but we couldn't have imagined the response, the backlash from that, especially against pregnancy centers, because there's so much anger.
Toby DuBois at Crisis Pregnancy Center of Tidewater Kyme Centers recently shared an example of that anger at one of his center's 5 locations.
They put Jane's Revenge on our window, spray painted the Anarchy A on it. Whoever did that, they must have surveilled our place and found that one moment that they could kind of sneak in there, and they had to move quick.
DuBois says while his clinics are seeing a record number of patients, there's also an increase in fake online reviews, criticizing their work, and abortion advocates posing as patients to harass workers. As a result, the center recently implemented high-tech security measures with better surveillance and more control over clinic access.
We've had to put the technology in place so that when they come in, that we can have confidence about who's coming in and that they can get in quickly. We want a system that can allow them very quick access.
Armed guards also now patrol the area.
We'd hired a professional security firm and told them, when Roe gets overturned, we want your guards to be on our premises. And they have been, and since Roe was overturned. And they come out there covertly and overtly. So sometimes you don't see them, but they're there, and sometimes you see them. And so that's a huge change for us.
State officials and local law enforcement are also getting involved.
Our governor, our attorney general, has reached out to us and other pregnancy centers, letting us know that they care, they're concerned, wanting to do whatever they can in this moment. We have been so encouraged working with the local police departments. They have really stepped up, increased patrols around our locations.
The need is growing nationally as Philadelphia's pro-life union office, also attacked and targeted by vandals, recently tightened security.
We have gotten cameras, we have the police are out there, and some of our centers have actually even hired outside security officers to be out there 24 hours a day.
Union volunteer Phaedra Anderson says despite the recent attacks, more people are giving to the group's mission of rescuing the unborn.
There has been an increase in financial support. We got a donation for our maternity home for $2,500 after the ruling. Our applications for volunteers have beefed up. I think that this has lit a fire under some people that say, now I need to get into this. I need to do something.
In the end, DuBois says he and his staff plan to continue the work God has entrusted to them.
The Lord is our light and our salvation. Whom shall we fear? The Lord is our stronghold. Whom shall we be afraid? Even if the army encamps around us, we're not going to have fear. We're going to have confidence. So our confidence is in the Lord.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are battling it out over the future of abortion in America. Two pro-choice bills made it through the House and are now heading to the Senate. One would codify abortion access into federal law. The other protects out-of-state travel for abortions. For more, let's bring in CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka. Matt, these bills made it through the House Friday on mostly party lines. Do they still have a shot of going anywhere in the Senate?
Well, Tara, it's highly doubtful that either of these bills make any sort of traction in the Senate, but that won't stop House Democrats from at least trying to force the issue. As you just mentioned, both of these bills passing largely along party lines, with House Democrats already making this part of their core platform in the wake of that Supreme Court Roe v. Wade decision. But what we did see last week and on Friday was one of the first of what's expected to be many of these head-to-head battles between Democrats and Republicans over the abortion issue. Take a listen.
Every single American has the right and the freedom to make the health care decisions that they need, including abortion.
Life comes first. You can't have liberty without life. You can't have the pursuit of happiness without life. That should guide us and be the bedrock for our moral authority, so that abortion would become unthinkable in America.
And we keep mentioning that they passed largely along party lines. That's because 3 Republicans did join all Democrats in voting for one of the bills that would protect pregnant women from traveling across state lines for abortion services.
Matt, so what's going to happen when these bills actually get to the Senate?
Well, that's the big question, and it always comes down to that 60 votes. And that's 60 votes that they certainly do not have in the Senate right now. A lot of pro-life Republicans have shown no interest in moving towards the Democrats' position. As a matter of fact, both of those bills that passed the House have been shot down in one form or another already in the Senate. But you can look to Republicans as they pitch some bills that are going to focus on supporting some of the pregnant women who might have previously been seeking abortion services. Expect that to dominate that side of the conversation going forward.
All right, Matt.
Versus Wade was a historic occasion that signals a new beginning for millions of unborn American babies. I'm looking forward to informing the American public why the Supreme Court's decision is a positive development for our country.
Now, along with some of those support bills you already mentioned, Senator Hawley's bill that would make it a felony to vandalize some of those crisis pregnancy centers. Expect a lot of that conversation to brew even more as the issue takes center stage here on Capitol Hill. Tara?
All right, Matt Galka from Capitol Hill tonight. Thanks, Matt. A Trump insider's contempt of Congress trial gets underway. What is at stake for Steve Bannon? That story and more when we come back. Welcome back. Jury selection is underway in Steve Bannon's contempt of Congress trial. Former President Trump's ex-campaign CEO and White House strategist is facing 2 contempt charges for his failure to comply with subpoenas from the January 6th House Select Committee. The trial is taking place at a federal court here in the nation's capital. It marks the first time a member of President Trump's inner circle will face a jury over the events of the January 6th Capitol attack. Bannon's trial is only expected to last a few days. He is facing up to a year in prison on each count. The sentencing trial has begun for Nicholas Cruz, the man who murdered 17 people more than 4 years ago at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. This marks the deadliest U.S. mass shooting to go before a jury. Cruz pleaded guilty to 17 counts of first-degree murder last October. The 12 jurors and 10 alternates will decide whether the 23-year-old former student serves life behind bars or face the death penalty. The trial is expected to last 4 months. A city bearing the scars of war, how residents of one Ukrainian town looking to God amid devastating Russian attacks. Next on Faith Nation. To the war in Ukraine and a shakeup in President Vladimir Zelensky's inner circle. Zelensky has suspended his top spy chief and a prosecutor general. The move comes amid allegations people within their departments collaborated with Russian forces committing treason, although the two fired officials haven't been explicitly accused of those. President Zelensky says the more than 650 active criminal treason proceedings raise very serious questions about their leadership. The Ukrainian city of Bucha has suffered unspeakable atrocities at the hands of Russian forces. Hundreds of civilians brutally murdered and buried in mass graves. Still, in the middle of the horror, stories of miracles and God's protection continue to unfold. George Thomas brings us details from Bucha, Ukraine.
This is one of the main roads leading to Bucha, a city on the outskirts of Kyiv. Along this highway, burned-out Russian tanks serve as a reminder of Moscow's failed attempts to capture the capital. I can count at least 8 Russian tanks, and these are the tanks that were, in essence, guarding the road to Bucha. And it's really remarkable that since Russia's invasion on February 24th, that today the two cities of Bucha and Irpin are completely free and are in control of the Ukrainians. At one point, this spot became a popular gathering place for people taking pictures and walking amidst the charred remains.
The Russians should take these tanks and parade them in Moscow. The fact that we forced them out of Bucha is God's miracle. This is God's miracle and nothing else.
Despite the victory, the horrors of what happened in Bucha continue to haunt the nation. 15 miles west of Kyiv, forensic experts recently exhumed the bodies of 7 civilians found buried here in the forest. Investigators say one of the bodies had been decapitated.
Shots to the knees tell us the people were tortured. The hands tied behind the back with tape says the people had been held hostage for a long time, and they tried to get any information from them.
Russian forces withdrew from Bucha on March 31st. 4 months later, Ukrainian authorities are still finding bodies.
So far, we have not identified approximately 213 bodies of the dead. This is an operating figure. We identify bodies every day. Sometimes new bodies appear.
A European human rights delegation visiting Bucha late last month called the scene a theater of cold-blooded murder of civilians on a massive scale. Now, international investigators are gathering evidence to determine whether war crimes were committed.
We talk not only about those who committed the crime, the direct crime, on the spot and in location. They, of course, have responsibility. But we're also talking about those who are in the chain of command, if necessary, right to the very top.
Oleg Bondarenko knows how fortunate he is to be alive. A few days after war started, Russian soldiers captured this pastor along with several other civilians and tortured them behind this gate for days.
I was so nervous that they would find something compromising about me. The Russian battalion commander did not like me. He was always angry with me.
Bondarenko told CBN News that the Russians wanted information on Ukrainian military positions in the area.
The commander said he would make me watch as he killed the others, and then he would skin me alive.
Ukrainian soldiers launched a counter-offensive and managed to rescue Bondarenko.
The Russians didn't even have time to come and say goodbye to us. There were lots of our soldiers and the battle was intense.
Not far from Bondarenko, Sergei Anokhin and 167 Ukrainian Christians hid in the basement of this Bucha church when the Russian assault started.
4 Russian soldiers came into the basement. The rest were standing over there. There were 15 of them. When they entered the church, they kicked open the church door and cursed at us.
Remaining at the church for several days, the soldiers constantly intimidated those hiding in the basement. Video and pictures obtained by CBN News show church members praying, singing, and reading scriptures day and night.
We now know that during this time, while we sought refuge in the basement, People around us, many of them were being killed by the Russians. Many of them were being tortured.
Anohin believes God spared their lives because of their prayers.
It was very clear to us that God was watching over us. Everything was in His hands. Like the story of how Daniel was in the lion's den. We were under God's protection.
Days after Russian troops withdrew from Bucha after failing to capture the capital, Ukraine's security agency met with Anohin about a Russian commander who had been at the church.
One of the Russian soldiers, his nickname was Skipper, he would come and talk to us in the basement every day. We thought he was a kind soldier, but the Ukrainian security service later told us that he was one of the most cruelest soldiers and apparently ordered multiple killings and was responsible for torturing people in basements around Bucha.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
In April, Russia's President Vladimir Putin honored the brigade that laid siege to Bucha, calling their acts mass heroism and bravery. Ukraine has accused the brigade of committing war crimes.
I would like for people to pray for our city, that God would give peace in people's hearts. There's a lot of anger and hatred for what the Russians did to us, but I'm praying God will touch us and give us peace.
Anohin, whose home was destroyed on the second day of war, says residents of Bucha are slowly returning, trying to get back to normal. Still, the trauma from the war lingers, and the healing is only beginning.
I would like our city to be remembered for those who were loyal, those who protected the city, and those who were faithful to God.
George Thomas, CBN News, Bucha, Ukraine.
Finally tonight, from buses to bikes to bird scooters, getting into work can take all sorts of forms, right? But a Colorado tradition might be the most unique commute across the country. Residents of Boulder recently celebrated the city's 14th annual Tube to Work Day. More than 500 people braving the rapids, tubing down Boulder Creek on their way to work, some looking ready for the office, dressed in business suits, others donning costumes. The event began as an environmentally friendly way to get to work and quickly grew into a beloved tradition. Sure beats sitting in traffic. See you tomorrow.